all future companies that are going to be successful, that they really are going to dominate, are going to be led by technology people. They're going to be people that truly and inherently understand the digital landscape and what and how technology impacts the market, their business, and their employees and their workforce.
You're listening to Augmented Ops, where manufacturing meets innovation. We highlight the transformative ideas and technologies shaping the front lines of operations, helping you stay ahead of the curve in the rapidly evolving world of industrial tech. Here's your host, Natan Linder, CEO and co-founder of Tulip, the frontline operations platform.
In this episode, what we're going to talk about is how does digital transformation look like from the IT perspective, and perhaps even the system integrator perspective, with Jeff Kramer, who is leading Kason Industries' digital factory transformation program and its digital transformation. Jeff, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, man.
Welcome to Augmented Ops. It's great to have you here.
Great to be here. Little introduction. As you said, I'm Jeff Kramer. Currently, I'm the Vice President of Technology and the Digital Factory for Kason. I spent my career, though, in consulting and professional services. The best way to think about me is a business owner, technologist, right? So started out in development for about 10 years, did everything from assembler code to 4GL stuff, started doing security work for the Marine Corps in the late 80s. So I have a DoD bent to my security background. Often, kind of did security before it was cool to do security stuff. In the 90s, I spent a lot of time doing carrier work. So a lot of enterprise carrier work. I do jokingly say, unlike Al Gore, I actually did help build some of the internet. And I've really just spent my entire career across multiple industries, manufacturing, utilities, government, federal, state, healthcare, insurance, just you name it. It's been a career that has really just taken me around the world in just hundreds of different companies with technology. But I think the thing that makes me really unique is I'm also a business owner. So I started my first company when I was 18. I've had several companies throughout my life. Last set of companies I started with a friend of mine and a partner in 2001. And we grew that, eventually merged with another partner, and over the course of 21 years, and ultimately merged that with Aprio, which was a top 25 business advisory CPA firm. And I was the EVP at Aprio for their digital practice for about 3 years. And then I decided to take everything I knew and move over to Kason and help Kason on really the picture perfect journey, right? How do you take a company that's 98 years old, well-established manufacturer?
What do you guys make, for those who are listening that don't know what Kason is making?
Couple of great products, right? So we are in the hardware business for walk-in coolers and freezers. So I like to tell people pretty much the last freezer somebody walked into to get your steak, they probably were using Kason hardware.
So all the restaurants, all the
your restaurants and everything. And it's a health and safety thing, right? So
I think I saw one in
important.
my kids' school.
Yeah.
In the cafeteria.
Yeah. It's incredible. It's a great story and it's a great product. It's made in the US.
Yeah.
And we do the full manufacturing process too, right? That I think is the other real important part, all the way from,
it's also likely built to order because you have to fit it to the architecture.
Yeah. So we do on occasion have custom orders or customer products that are unique to a specific customer. And we do some products in the automotive space. All right. So we have some quality and compliance requirements in automotive. We make the inner assembly for delivery trucks, the sliding doors and stuff like that. Because, you really got to make sure that stuff's working right. You don't want drivers falling out at 65 miles an hour. That'd be a bad day.
Bad day.
Right? And also a lot of products in food services. So just generally food services is, our primary market and stuff like that. So it's a fabulous company. I'm super excited to be there. Family run, private company. So it's a close knit group of people. But they're 98 years old. And the owner, he says, we're a link in the chain. How do we get to another 100 years? How do we double this? That's the conversation that really matters, because he's not going to get there if he isn't able to really advance the organization and increase the digital maturity.
So the owner and the CEO is looking at this company. How do they think about digital transformation from their perspective before we get to the meat here?
I'm going to say it's generational, right? So he's the next generation. He's the fourth generation. He recognizes technology is kind of embedded in almost everything we do. So he's much more open to it. They've just not been able to successfully navigate the change and moving that forward. Now, you have to kill the sacred cows, right? That's the challenge. And as a business owner, I kind of appreciate and understand, how do you build a business and run a business? How do you build operations? How do you build sales and marketing? How do you run your finance organization? All of those things are really important. How do you build the HR organization? All those things come together, and it's a combination of executive leadership for the business as well as understanding technology.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. My title is the VP of Technology and the Digital Factory. We start with the assumption that there is no big divide between the technology team. I don't call them IT, they're technology team, because they're involved in all things related to technology, and the digital factory, what we're doing as we mature everything from connecting and collecting data on the shop floor all the way through how we drive insights and all the really cool stuff, right?
So from his perspective, digital transformation is not some strategy buzzword that
Nope.
people throw around. He sees that as an imperative to take the business and
Yep.
support the customer for the next several decades of growth.
That's right.
Where's IT in this organization?
So I own what you would call traditional IT.
And yet
right?
you don't call it IT.
I don't call
anymore.
it IT.
That's interesting.
I've rebranded. We are a technology team
Mhm.
because we are involved in all aspects of technology. And that's where there's this great knowledge base and experience around some of those things. And so I want that to be exposed. And ultimately, the goal is to enable a large digital factory. So it's not kind of like a separation.
Yeah. So let's kind of unpack some stuff about IT for a second, because sometimes
Yeah.
IT have this like bad rep, like
Mm.
they're the gatekeepers, they're destroyers of fun and buyers of not needed digital toys on one
Those
side.
that say
on one
no.
hand, those who say no, the knights
That's
who say no, and then the other side of it, I feel like there's like an BCAC. What I mean by that is like before Christ, after Christ, where what does this information technology even mean anymore? Like,
Mhm. Yeah.
there was a time there was like no computers, I guess, and obviously no internet, no that, this, that, and the other. So at some point we got this digital revolution and networking and everything that follows. But it's such a given now,
Yeah. So when you look at technology teams and IT and or a CIO, they're often conflicted.
In this traditional org structure, I think
In the traditional organization.
inherently conflicted.
Yeah, really restricted. And so, our strategy is anchored on three core concepts: agile, lean, and data driven. That's the strategy. Those are the principles upon which we built the strategy. And within that concept is the idea that everybody should be enabled to participate in our technology, regardless of where it is in the organization. And that goes directly toward that constraint that if you try to get your IT team to do all the technology stuff, you can't put enough money in that bucket. So when you break out of that mindset and you say, I want to enable more of my users to participate in development and enabling and using technology to create solutions, all of a sudden you go from maybe 10 people to 50 people just by tapping a percentage of your organization. You don't need them all. You just need a percentage. We have a really great success story that we did. One of the first things I did when I got there was that we have to first see the work.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't see the work, you can't manage it, right? That's a really simple principle. And most organizations that I work in and have supported and consulted for couldn't see the work. They can't see how much people have in their queue, what the priorities are, what the constraints are, where the unplanned work is coming from. You just can't see it. So we did ClickUp as a great tool, and I'm not here to endorse any tools, but we used that tool because it did two things. One, it helped us see the work, but two, and more important, I could let the end users, I could educate and enable different people in the organization to customize it for their environment, for their needs.
So this ClickUp was used for use cases like where, for example?
You can look at service ticketing, things like that, where people needed to just
like project management,
open a ticket, project scheduling. We use it for some other stuff, some other dynamic things where we track like compliance in it. We can track our compliance programs in it. We track some assets in it. So it's a really robust platform.
That's what you started to, people adopt ClickUp or Monday or Atlassian or what have you.
Yeah. So you get that, you got to get that mindset. So now I've got the success story. So people are like, oh, I get it. And so now when we go into that digital manufacturing space, we're pushing that forward. That principle of enabling the quality team, the manufacturing engineering team, the die cast team, the assembly team, enabling them to participate in this, A, teach my technology team they don't have to solve every problem, and
Right.
B, showing that the organization has the ability to do it. And now all of a sudden, I've increased my resources order of magnitudes bigger.
You not only accomplish that, it's like, you were saying go see the work, but to change work, the question is who can change work and why do they have a chance and an impact to make a sustainable change? I think it's because it's the people with the context of the work who can actually do the change, assuming they have the right tool.
That's right.
But here lies the question. You ask our friends in McKinsey, and I think my good friend Anna DeVoe coined the term pilot purgatory. That's
Yeah,
kind of a
exactly.
McKinsey claim to fame type of thing. And I think the stats are like 70 to 80% of digital transformation efforts completely fail, meaning
Yeah.
the people leave the company, the project gets shuts down, the vendors can't get canceled, contracts, system integrators are sent
Yeah.
to the system integrator box of shame, and
That's right. Yeah.
then the organization goes into this like PTSD. Oh, we failed. Like, let's just not do this again.
Yeah.
Why is that happening, or why is it so hard? And more
Yeah.
importantly, let's just say you got there. What to do next? Let's talk
Yeah.
about that. Like, how do you get out of that? Because it's possible to do. So,
Yeah, it's absolutely possible, and it is a complicated problem, right? It's not one dimensional, right?
right.
There's if I use my consulting speak, people, process,
Please
technology, all that
consult,
stuff.
speak to me.
Yeah, consultant speak, right? People,
Yeah.
process, technology. But when you get into the job and you actually are like, I'm going to take this company on this journey, it starts with the business strategy. Often the lead technology person is not really at the seat helping drive the company forward, right? And so I believe that all future companies that are going to be successful, that they really are going to dominate, are going to be led by technology people. They're going to
Mhm.
be people that truly and inherently understand the digital landscape and what and how technology impacts the market, their business, and their employees and their workforce, right? So you got to be at the table, really at the table, driving the business strategy as well. And it's got to cascade out of that business strategy. But then when you get into the details, it is about building relationships. A lot of projects kind of fail because the leader or the lead technology person, the IT person, doesn't put the necessary cycles in to build relationships with the business users, right? It's about really understanding what outcomes the business user is trying to accomplish. And that takes time. You have to put the cycles in every week, touching base with those business users. You can't just sort of like set it and forget it, especially because most of digital is transformational at its core, meaning you're changing the way people do their jobs, you're changing the way they solve problems. And so that really is a change management, organizational change management, and a people person, right? I often say it's 80% people, 20% computers,
Yeah.
right?
This is very clear. But if we now take it even notch down, make it more specific, we're not talking about just digital transformation in a generic services organization or a
Yeah,
bank or something like that, or a law firm. All good, needs digital transformation too.
yeah,
We're talking about operating companies with manufacturing department and warehouses and front office and supply chain, all that.
yeah,
And then alongside this weird term IT that we kind of touched on, there is this other term called OT,
yes,
which I
right.
think is even more elusive.
That's
How
right.
does OT play into it? Do you have that separation at Kason? Are you thinking through those lens? How do you tie the two? And it's almost like canonical to bottom up
Yeah.
than the top down.
So it's an organizational alignment issue, which happens all the time with technology, where I need multiple departments to be on board to move forward. Now, the easy
Mhm.
projects are like if you're just doing something that impacts just one department, and this is traditional IT. If I'm doing
Yeah.
something, it's one department, super easy to do. But the bigger projects are the ones that I need to get 4 or 5 departments to start to sync together because I've deployed an enterprise solution that really impacts the whole organization. And, a digital strategy is something that addresses the edge to edge activities inside of a company and beyond into partners and customers, right? So if you're really doing digital strategy correctly, you are at the extreme edge of use cases trying to bring together people in multiple
Mhm.
departments and different hierarchies and all that stuff. It's almost a little bit of a trap to fall into the IT versus OT thing, right? I reject the premise
Yeah.
that that is what you have to do to be successful. I push my technology team into manufacturing, and I want the manufacturing team to understand how we're using technology broadly. Because as you move forward, and you want to, do things with AI. It's like, where's the data coming from? You've got to pull the data up. And if people don't understand that whole life cycle, they don't understand the purpose of doing some action or how it integrates in with the larger picture.
Yep.
If the IT department doesn't understand how you make money as a manufacturer, then they're missing most of the story.
So how have you seen this done, if you can share a bit, like in the real world? So I think a lot of people understand that trap. Maybe they are more comfortable, less comfortable talking about it. I think that
Yep.
depends often on size of the organization, maturity, whether
Yep.
they are thinking, more dramatically investing. Because you sometimes walk into super large enterprises and they have folks with roles like chief digital officers and the like. But sometimes, when you walk into smaller mid-market type companies, it's all very tightly knit. So how have you seen this approach put to work in practice?
Naturally, as an organization gets bigger, people start segmenting roles and, they get put into their box, and it becomes very obvious that you have people in their little fiefdom, and then you have to break that apart. The small to medium sized companies, sometimes it's harder to see it, but it's definitely there. And I would also say most of the small to medium manufacturers struggle to have the right technology leadership, right? There's a limited number of people that can truly do digital transformation, because you need a technology business owner. You need somebody who understands business and understands all of this technology. And you and I both know it's almost a full-time job just keeping up with the changes in technology, right? So to find the right person that can, take you on this journey is challenging. And once you get through some of those barriers, though, you're right. There's some traps in the sense that manufacturing engineering often is kind of a critical team, because they're the ones that are going to enable the connect and collect stage. They're really the ones that are going to connect and really make stuff happen. And what I find happens is you start talking to the MEs, and they're working on, how do I enable an actuator to enable the production cycle to continue?
Mm-hmm.
And you start a conversation, say, hey, I want to connect to this and we're going to collect some more data. And they're like, well, what type of data do you want? And they're like, oh, I trigger this and I trigger that. So it's all very real world, make the flow happen in that cell. And you've got to get beyond that. You're like, no, I need temperature data. I need state data. I need a lot more information off of this unit, so that we could then answer questions in the future, which we don't even know what questions we want to ask yet, right? Changing the lens of manufacturing engineering and working up from them, as well as getting IT to really understand and appreciate the challenges it takes to keep manufacturing up and keep OEE high and keep the throughput working, right? The fragility or brittleness of a process becomes very critical. And so they're coming at it from different sets of responsibilities. So one way to kind of help fix that is you got to give them joint responsibilities. You got to build a team. No one person can do this. No one department can do this. So I fall back on sort of, some of the lean principles and agile principles, where give me a small group of people that want to work together to a higher vision. And then they get vested in that mission, in that journey. And then they start to kind of work together and stuff. But teams aren't built by putting people together. Teams are built through joint experiences, right?
Totally
and so, don't expect your team that you just formed last Tuesday to miraculously be working together. They have to have some joint challenges that they work through together to build the confidence to then say, oh, we can take on the next challenge, even though we don't know how to solve it yet.
Yep. We talked about the people and this transformation stuff. Let's talk about the technology for a second. So I'm sure you walked into Kason, you already saw, sometimes people, maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. They say, well, we have all this legacy here. We have ERP and SCADA. This system was two VP of IT ago, and that one Johnny implemented because he was an expert in XYZ. And that one is a SCADA we had to put in because we bought this new amazing machine and it needed conveying and feeding, otherwise the ROI wouldn't be there. So we put SCADA, but it's kind of an island. Like, how do you start maneuvering with all the pieces of tech that is in existence? And how are you taking concrete action to craft what I think everybody needs, which is sort of a technology stack and architecture for the organization that bridges, the edge, the cloud, the IT, OT, and all that kind of stuff?
It's multiple work streams. There's multiple work streams that are in flight within the digital strategy. The principle that helps us maneuver through that specific challenge is building an agile program. So, not looking for a solution that solves every problem, but looking for solutions that are more component driven so
Hmm.
that you can pull out the capabilities that you need to solve the specific use case you're working on, right?
Hmm.
I like to say I have a spectrum of opportunities. On the right hand side, I have the brand new, fully automated, highly optimized assembly cell. And on the left side, I've got the 60-year-old power press that, only two guys in the world know how to manage, right? And I need a solution that I can bring in anywhere on that spectrum. I need the agility to adjust as I'm doing different use cases, right? So building an agile program, which is more component driven, is something that comes out of the technology world and lives in manufacturing as well. But in technology, we've gotten microservices, component, container driven software development, pub sub, message buses, like we've done this for a while now. And so you have to educate people. It's like, hey, we're going to take these principles, we're going to apply them to this. Now, I think the other swim lane that's important in a digital strategy today is enterprise architecture. You
Hmm.
have to be able to know where you're going. So just building agile and just hammering away a bunch of little solutions, you'll get in trouble if you don't know where you're trying to go. What's the future end state? And so enterprise architecture becomes really important today as it relates to all technology. What's the business outcome? What's the capability? How does my technology stack lay on top of that and move me toward my end goal?
So, when you look at the landscape today, I think what a lot of what comes even before, it could be in parallel to the architecture, is this big term called what is the data model? You know,
Yeah,
how are we going to define our data model? Where's the source of
yeah,
truth and where's it going and
yeah,
where's it coming from and so on. So, the first question I have is like, where do you see that today and how should people think about that for the architecture or in
yeah.
parallel? And the second is like when you think about operation, where do you see like all the Purdue ISO 95 model? Are they still relevant models? Like will be 30 years or more soon since they were introduced, and what's the alternative in this agile world?
Yeah.
Or maybe there are no alternatives.
So break those apart. So, agile, lean, data driven programs. So data is 1/3 of the digital strategy for sure. And data governance and data is a discipline out of itself, right? Over my life, there's been a lot of energy that goes into how do you govern data. And most organizations struggle at it. So don't feel like if you're struggling at that, you're unique. Most companies really struggle at data governance. And it gets really kind of hairy because you mentioned like what's the system of record, where's your master record, where's your gold records, and what are convenience copies. And so it starts to get really complicated. And then just even understanding how you do data governance and data quality and data lineage and all those things is a big ask. And then now you go into a digital factory, and the number one mission I have is to create more data. So if you aren't disciplined and you don't have the organizational capabilities to do data governance, and then you go off and you create mountains of new data, what could possibly go wrong with that, right? I mean, it's just going to be a train wreck. So you have to kind of build in data governance as a capability for an organization. And then as you recognize, I'm going to generate and collect more data, and not just raw data, but data about data, like metadata on the data. Like you really have to create a lot of data. And a lot of people jump to, we'll say AI today. It's a big term, and we could talk about that for an hour by itself, right? But it's data science. It's the things that we've been doing for a while now about predictive analysis and moving up that value chain of data. It is about AI and training new AI and all that stuff. Like, a lot of people like, I want to do an FAQ thing on my customer service portal. Do you have the data? Like, have you even collected that data? You
Yeah.
have the conversations. Where are you going to get your data? Right. So the end state that everybody talks about, just call it AI today, it's fueled by data. And so you have to bring those together. You have to interweave your data governance and growing those capabilities with data generation, and then how that maps into a data architecture. So you know where it is and how you scale that up. So you could set yourself up for data science and
Yeah.
predictive analysis and all those things, right? You got to skate to where the puck is going, not where the puck is. Complicated problem.
And that's how we go to enterprise architecture. So supposedly
Yes.
enterprise architectures, which is the source of endless fun meetings to debate said architecture, is kind of like the inoculation against how to get going. Because on one hand, people want this agile, let's get quickly results, invest, but see some output quickly, feel the change, live the change, scale it up. And they want it yesterday and in sprint like rhythms, like every 2 weeks, something new is kind of dropping and changing the organization. And that's good. People feel it and all that. But you know what they want at the same time? At the same time, they want this to be future proof. I don't know. I have like this love-hate relationship with this concept of future proof. Like what does that even mean?
Well, I guess it depends how far out in the future you're trying to.
Right, but they want like the architecture to last like a decade plus, which is a tough thing. What's your advice? And I think a lot of our folks are either in the process or starting to think about the process. The tension between those two ends. How do you reconcile it?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to say it. There's going to be tension between enterprise architecture, and the discipline of doing enterprise architecture can become just nauseating. Like it's a whole different set of languages, and some people really can just get lost in that exercise. For me, it's a messaging tool. It's a way to articulate how this complexity produces the outcomes I want for the business. It helps me prioritize and find out where do we need to put our energy and what opportunities are there that are going to impact the business the most, right? So it's a vehicle to help you structure your thoughts. I look at enterprise architecture more about as almost a mental model on how I think about the business and how ultimately all of this technology is kind of going to work in support those business outcomes, right? So it's a discipline in that sense, right? It's not I'm going to define some enterprise architecture that's unmovable. Like that's not the point, right? You need an agile program, so you need to build an architecture that has flexibility and can scale up. Now, you can take everything to extremes, right? If every time you started a new project, you picked a different programming language, you'll get no momentum because everybody's constantly learning and nobody can really become proficient at it. So you can drive some real outcomes, right? So you have to be agile and you have to pick some strategies that you're going to anchor around and stick with them, right? But don't be rigid, right? So I like your concern, which is how do you future-proof? Well, we have shown year over year over year that we have exponential growth going on right now in robotics, in AI, in energy storage, in many different places. And we're on that S-curve for so many different industries. And that rate of change is very hard for people to absorb because we don't really know what we're going to do with AI just 24 months from now because of compute and chips and silicon and all that stuff. So you can't have a rigid program. You have to have something that's got some agility. And that's one of the reasons to do agile is so that you're not trying to buy a bunch of capabilities that's going to take you 4 years to deploy because you're not going to know what 4 years is going to look like. Find the capabilities you need that solves your needs, build success there, and then success builds success. Then replicate and scale that up, right? You need the agility. And then lean is sort of and I don't do lean because I'm in manufacturing. I do lean because the principles are good for technology. It's not because I'm in manufacturing. It's a coincidence. I'm in manufacturing and we're talking about lean. Yeah. But the principles of lean, like batch processing. Worst thing we ever created in IT is batch processing. You know, I don't know. Why is it not up to, because we do the batch run on Thursday for HR and then all the records will get updated. So it's wrong today. It'll be right in 2 days. It's the worst thing possible, right?
It's funny because every time we get to, lean meets technology, I always remind people that all the software engineering architects and then their auxiliaries like the product managers, PMs, technical product owners, they basically stole lean and maneuvered it to become a whole new agile scrum methodology. And the irony is operations are still doing what they're doing, but on the technology side, they're like 20 years ago and they're doing lean on whiteboards and papers and whatnot, but they're not lean on the technology cycles. But success will breed success and lean will lead the way. Jeff, this has been great. I really appreciate you coming on, and it was a good discussion on digital transformation.
Yeah. Anytime, my friend. Anytime. I love doing this stuff. We can all teach each other different things.
Yeah. Thanks for coming for Augmented Ops, and we'll see you very soon.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Augmented Ops podcast from Tulip Interfaces. We hope you found this week's episode informative and inspiring. You can find the show on LinkedIn and YouTube or at tulip.co/podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating or review on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Until next time.